Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Langguth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome everybody. My name is Alexander Greb. I'm Consulting Director at CBS Corporate Business Solutions, and you are listening to Transformation Every Day. Expert insights and stories on SAP and beyond. Clean Core. It's more than a technical requirement. It's a mindset and shift how developers build, adapt, and keep systems future ready. If our episode 17 with Michael Sokolek was the first half of our Clean Core journey, today's conversation with Lukas Bretschneider, SAP's lead architect for Clean Core Extensibility, takes us into the next level, the development details. We will explore how Clean Core shapes the way we develop, govern, and grow. And fun fact, this episode was actually requested by one of you. During the DSAG annual conference, a listener of Transformation Every Day came up to me and said, "You've got to bring Lukas on the show." Shout out to you. Here he is. Let's get started.
When was the white paper released on this?
August
Couple
12th.
of weeks. Yeah, couple of weeks back. Yeah.
So it's almost exactly 2 months.
I think there were some revisions done, right? Already.
It's ongoing. Online is still the first version. And I think there are, let's say, some revisions where I'm not part of, where like management wanted to have this more emphasized in the beginning and blah, blah, blah. But there's also, there are parts in where I also see it coming from the feedback. We have these 4 levels, Clean Core, A, B, C, D. And A and B, both on the high level picture, are named as Clean Core, which leads to the interesting situation that people use the level B part, which is like classic stuff, sub GUI, smart forms and subscript are level B. That people start like, yeah, and I do my new development with sub GUI, ALV, and subscript because it's level B. It's Clean Core. It's like, no, that's not how it is meant. So that we maybe introduce a new line and some more emphasis in the text. It's clearly saying, hey, go for the highest level possible. Yeah.
Lucas, did you see Alex's blood pressure rising? I could see his face when you mentioned it.
No, the blood pressure is because first of the time we are recording, because it's a heavily coffee fueled podcast. But good morning, gentlemen. Great to have you. We are recording Transformation Every Day. Johannes is back from vacation, so I expect relaxed, and I expect him to be absolutely on spot today. I can probably lean a little bit back because we are going to be a little bit techie, nerdy. Lukas, is it right to say like that?
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully.
It depends, my friends who really code don't call me nerdy because I'm the guy who's just talking. And the friends who do not code, they call me nerdy because I'm wearing an ABAP hoodie and I know how to open up ABAP development tools and create a custom class.
Do they actually still make those ABAP hoodies, or is it something like a repro vintage thing?
Yeah. So there is, I think, from an external out of the communities, one who has a shop who's doing this, kind of semi-officially. But it's not the one that I'm wearing is the one that I'm wearing is basically privately paid and organized. It's like there was no official merch back then. That's like 1.5, 2 years back. Now we have official shirts. So shout out to ABAP Platform. I received an ABAP Cloud shirt last year.
When we do the next recording with you, Lukas, we all have to wear this shirt then.
Yeah, absolutely.
The ABAP Cloud shirt.
Absolutely.
So Alex Rother needs to be on spot here.
I have to be quite careful now and not to say, to mock about, is this from the same shop with the COBOL and the Fortran hoodies? Because otherwise, the more old school SAP consultants again put a shitstorm on me on LinkedIn, like it often happens. But it's great. We are talking about, ABAP in the way how to get it clean. Dirty ABAP? Is it okay to say something like that?
Yeah, certainly. I would say in the whole discussion of Clean Core, often it's like Clean Core is perceived as it's the custom code topic, the extensibility topic alone. And I think there's a good reason for this. Sometimes I say that, and being happy working with ABAP a lot, I can still say that unclean stuff mostly happens in ABAP because it offers you a lot of flexibility.
Because it's a working horse.
Exactly. And
yeah.
And now we kind of, what is it now? 2 years, 3 years ago, we offered now a programming model that is more restrictive, that's partially adapted in the market. But at the same time, without this, yes, we give you full flexibility. And I think it was mentioned in the episode with Michael Sokolek, like that's also part of the success. And I think if you listen into keynotes from, let's say, the ABAP developers, it's also there well known and received. Without this kind of flexibility, maybe SAP would not be there where we are now, serving everyone in the business world, because we need this kind of flexibility. But it's like, I think, we need to do the right thing in ABAP, and we offer something there now. But yes, of course, you can still do very dirty things and unclean things in ABAP.
Do you feel it's a step backward? Now, being a little bit provocative again. Like, do you feel that now that we become more restrictive, is it kind of the beginning of the end of ABAP?
No. I think as long as we have the main core systems like in S4HANA running on ABAP, there will always be the need to do something directly in the same box, in the same language, in the same runtime. So I think it's even a step forward to say, like, we have a more restrictive model that allows you to extend while at the same time not destroy your system by accidentally modifying something or by just adding or calling a function module that has never been intended to be used externally, and that will crash in the next version of SAP because some developer in Waldorf decided, I will change this now, which is his or her good right. But it's like, you just used it because you felt like, hey, that's a good one. So if you're limited to only released APIs that are upgrade stable, you win. But yes, it's a step back from a basically gut feeling to say, okay, where do we end up now? I can only use this and that API. I think it's, if you're coming more from the cloud native and web development world, it's like, if any web tool, any SaaS tool out there does not offer you an API, you would never start like, okay, how can I open up that box magically and still do what I want to do? You would work around and say like, hey, how can I solve that requirement differently? And I think that's a bit, need to find the golden path there between flexibility and being pragmatic, and at the same time also keeping guardrails of governance up and alive.
Okay, we in the first 5 minutes now, we have built already a lot of gravitas with you. Everybody will think now, ooh, this guy is hugely competent, but we have not yet introduced you really. So we have Lukas Bretschneider here. Lukas, tell us first 2-3 sentences about yourself. You're one of the, let's say, long-term SAP folks.
Yeah,
that's
I think there are some more.
Say.
It's not just me. There are some more. So I'm not the one with the longest company history within SAP, definitely not. But it is 19 years now, almost exactly on the date that I'm with SAP. So I know nothing else but SAP. I have quite a technical background. So I was technical consultant for 15 years of that. Before then, I switched now more into the enterprise architecture world. But even there, I would consider myself as I'm basically the back office for enterprise architects. When it comes to Clean Core, to extensibility, some nerdy questions pop up. I'm there to cover the architects and to cover colleagues. The background that I have is more on coding architecture. So it went from some technical stuff like forms and general development over S4HANA conversion, or before that SAP HANA, Suite on HANA conversion, S4HANA conversion. And always was the big question, like, okay, when I do the mandatory stuff, what's the right thing? How do we develop software now? And this now then developed in the last, 5 years into Clean Core Extensibility. And I would say in the Clean Core part, I was always part of also internal programs of customer programs, but also with some part of my time, also internal programs shaping the Clean Core picture internally as well.
Perfect. And we are adding, like already said, up to the episodes with you. We already had with Michael Sokolek, with Michael more covering the strategic stuff. You're now going full on into the technical area. And the interesting thing was 3 weeks ago at the DSAG in Bremen, I was approached from somebody in the exhibition hall saying like, hey, I really love your podcast, but concerning Clean Core, you have to get Lukas Bretschneider. He's really great. And so it was great that I could tell this this friendly person that we already have planned to have you on board. So it's really great here. And I guess you will have a lot of happy listeners today.
So expectations are high now.
Expectations are
I
huge,
cannot chill now
huge.
and relax. It's like, now I need to
definitely
deliver.
not.
I think you can
not.
speak about it and still chill. Yeah. I think with all these open office hours that you run with all the enterprise architects calling you with all the nasty customer questions, I think nothing will shock you in this podcast.
Possibly, yeah.
When we had the call with and the recording with Michael, Michael really was clear about Clean Core is not only an architectural discipline, it's an attitude. Yeah, it is saying like, okay, we will not do it again like we did in the past. Make it easy for us, saying like, hey, we are just a platform, do whatever you want. And then basically we have the mess which is coming out in many areas, with architectures who are so highly modified that it's really, really, really difficult to do the next step. Was it difficult for you to make this kind of step? Or because when a whole ecosystem is changing the way it operates in a certain way by saying like, okay, probably we overdid it in the past a little bit. Was it something where you felt quite early already like, maybe that's a little bit much freedom that we have at the moment, which has also its backsides?
Yes, and I would see it a bit more ambiguous, because even 15 years back, and I think even 20 or 25 years back when I was not in the SAP Cosmos, there were rules of doing things the right way. No one would do a modification if you can have a nice extension point, if you have a body around or a customer exit. So I think it's not that or that many systems were purposely crashed, but at the same time, I saw and I just re-listened the episode with Michael in preparation, and I think there are some aspects, the project situation, what's the goal of a project? It's also important for us. This mindset and attitude is an important point, that we say, of course, I can build you the nicest thing on stack or side by side, and we could consider it clean from a technical point of view, but we shouldn't build golden balconies to our house every time, if just because someone is asking. So I think partly it is attitude, and it is a change, but also from a technical point, we should always, there was a focus on do the right things, doing it the right way. But I think it's about striking the right balance. I like this statement on Clean Core is not the goal, but it is basically a path to get there, or a therapy was mentioned with the podcast with Michael. I like that point, because it's like, in the end, it's for me, often I compare it to code quality. You would always expect high code quality from a developer, and it needs to be there. But at the same time, business would never say like, okay, we want to do this extension, this extra button or whatever, but please do good code quality. It's like, it should be built in. I think Clean Core, especially in extensibility, should be the same level to say, yeah, that is what we expect.
But can you zoom in a little bit? Does that mean in a day-to-day activity? Like when a developer wants to develop in a Clean Core aligned fashion, what's different compared to 10 years back? Just from a day-to-day perspective, how would you see that?
I think there are several aspects. One is knowledge and general frameworks. We move away from SAP GUI-driven DynPro development into RAP, so our new programming model in ABAP. We have options to do things side by side with cloud-native frameworks, with CAP, with Node.js. So you need to upskill. You need to know your options. And ideally, you know all of the options that are on the table. And you don't simply develop something in classic ABAP just because that's the way you know it. And at the same time, we could also phrase this a bit more positively. It's not like we are limiting developers, but also like now we have a clear guideline and a clear concept where we say, hey, these are APIs that you can use from SAP. And we have local APIs if you do ABAP coding on the S4 system on the stack. And before that, we had released BAPIs, but it was like, this was always a bit like, use BAPIs. And if not, look for function models, look for this and that, and basically look around and ask the right people. Now we have a flag that says this is a released object. We have stability contracts from SAP that tell you this API is basically promised to be there and it will be upgrade stable. And that's a big promise, because if you limit yourself to this, it first feels like limiting, but in the end, it's enriching your development because you're doing software development like in SaaS world, where you say like, hey, if we upgrade our S4 system, I rely on these APIs, my code will still be working. So I would say, yes, you need to know the big picture of RAP and all of this new stuff. And there are quite a lot of new things. So I don't like when we say, hey, we can reuse our ABAP skills if we stay on stack. It's like, no, on stack clean development with ABAP Cloud is something we need to be educated on, where we need to leave developers also the chance and the time when we look at leadership to enable ourselves onto that. And then it's like, know your new APIs. Everyone knew back then the tables and all the famous function modules. And now you need to relearn this a little bit.
Like, I mean, that's an exciting opportunity for developers, right? To learn, to expand knowledge, to do things differently. In your conversations with developers, do you also get pushback and say that this doesn't make sense?
Sure. Just imagine you did 15 years successful development. Everyone's happy with what you did. Although maybe it's like, it's a bit clunky in SAP GUI, but it's, if you know power users, they use SAP GUI, and a well-oiled ABAP list view interface, SAP GUI interface is super powerful. Then, of course, if we switch to the lightweight user interfaces to a Fiori interface, you will always get pushback like, it will not work there. And it will be more expensive. It's more complex. We have more engines in there. The UI is running in web technology with UI5. The backend is running in ABAP. In between, we have OData. And then it's like, it's more complex. And I think there are fair points on that. So yes, there is pushback. I think the pushback is a bit reduced once you get your hands dirty on this, that you say like, I really do this now, I experience it, because even in the new world, we offer frameworks that are a bit more end-to-end. So it was like everyone needed to figure out, do a course on this and that before you could create an ALV in an efficient way. Now you can open up a tutorial and you can create a new Fiori app basically in 5 minutes from a custom table. Then you need to add logic and stuff like that. But it's like, there are straightforward ways, but you need to know them. It's like, I think knowledge and enablement is key here, that the developers are aware of this. And I can also, just from a change management perspective, I can totally understand. If you know your stuff, if you did 15 years of one thing and then someone tells you like, hey, go for another path, you will know what you fought with for the last 15 years. And then I will tell you like, but can you do this and that and this and that? And then you're like, okay, show me.
Hi there. Quick break for a short message before we go right back to the episode. Enjoying the insights and stories on transformation every day? Want to make sure you never miss an episode packed with practical tips and best practices from the SAP world, featuring conversations with some of the most interesting people in the SAP universe? Then hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform, whether it is Apple, Spotify, or any other you use. And if our podcast brings you value, we would be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us. Thanks so much and happy listening.
Do you think this is also maybe a little bit of a consequence with business for the last 30 years? Always thinking like, oh, we are very unique. We do things completely different as anybody else. And that resulted in consultants being evaluated in a good consultant is the one who makes the craziest ideas happening. Yeah. And the good developer is the one who then takes that and turns it into code and so on. And with now the kind of change in thinking by so many people that, okay, there has to be a fit to standard. Yeah. Because BPM now has generated that knowledge in enterprises and organizations that, hey, it's actually like us humans. Yeah. We are looking different too, but we are 95, 98, 99% the same. And this now is trickling down to consultants and developers and so on, and putting away the pressure of doing the exotic things and giving them now the possibilities to be cleaner. Is this something what you would agree with?
Yes, I would definitely agree that there is some part in there. Of course, nothing is binary. It's not 1 and 0. And there are still things that where you differentiate from your competitor, or where simply the standard does not suit to what you need to do. If you need to extend somewhere a process and that's for you a key functionality, or you save millions, even if it's not in an area where you want to be differentiating, but you can simply save with 5 lines of code 500,000 a year, I would do the 5 lines of code, independent of how dirty they are. But I think what's new is, and then we come back to the initial words, attitude. It's like, even for consultants and for if we see our role as an advisor, we should be able and capable to tell someone like, is this really a good idea? That's why I like the pictures, and the one that I borrowed from Steffen Pietsch, our BTP head of product management, is the golden balconies. Don't put golden balconies everywhere on your house. Maybe there's one good place to do some, and maybe there are sometimes political reasons or business reasons to say, like, hey, that's one good thing to do, a deviation. But just to have this conversation, to also from a technical point say, like, hey, yeah, we can build this, but come back to the business process area. Is this really a good idea? Can't you fit with standard? And I can just look at what I developed over time. So it's, I think, more than 10 years ago, I developed something where afterwards it was pretty obvious this was 20 days development that is not making any sense, because anyway, you need to have some manual process afterwards. So it's happened only once a year. So we spent like 20 days for something where it's basically the effort that was saved was like maximum 5 days a year. And that's like, why would you create some more custom code just to say like, and use expensive consultants' time just to do that? And I think this is switching a little bit that we have now with all the software as a service approaches, standard approaches, and also the goal to say like everyone wants to be more standardized, run more in a cloud fashioned way, because we see the advantages of being more flexible, being more agile, that this also trickles down. At the same time, that's why I said I'm a bit hesitant to say like, yes, it's exactly like this. There is still need for customization, for deviation from standard, and there should be good reason. It's in the end,
Absolutely.
we often say Clean Core is about taking informed decisions.
We in consulting, for example, we solve that now by telling users, okay, if you want to have a deviation, give us a business case for that. If there's a business case for that, of course we will do it, and so on. But in the other case, if there's no business case, if it's just like what you call it, golden balconies, let's remain in standard as far as possible. Definitely.
Yeah.
Let's look into again to the developer community, because I think they are the ones that actually make it happen. Of course, Clean Core has 5 dimensions, and we all know that. With it's not just the extensibility side of the house, but it's very extensibility centric. Let me put it like this: Are there any myths that you get from the conversations with customers where you say, now it's the time to debunk them and be clear that Clean Core is not A or B? I would be very interested. What does the developer community think about Clean Core that should be corrected? And now you have the chance, Lukas.
Finally, after years of fighting. For one topic and one big myth, I would say there I feel a bit like Don Quixote fighting the windmills, because that was, and we can all point back then to my employer, to the big SAP. That's the source of this myth, that Clean Core only happens if you develop everything in BTP. I think that's one that was already debunked often. And of course, it's nice to develop side-by-side extensions, not run in the same runtime, because by definition, you're then decoupled. And, it's like easier to decouple yourself, but it will not work out. You will not have a system where you have no developments on stack, as we call it in the S4 system. And there are ways, and that's the second big myth that I want to clearly say, there are ways that you can do Clean Core development within your S4 system, within ABAP. It was only released 3 years ago, so it's rather new, thinking in the speed of our SAP Cosmos and what version is running with which customer. Not everyone is there yet, but yes, there are possibilities to create extensions in a Clean Core and upgrade stable way on the stack. We call it ABAP Cloud, and that's then maybe the third myth. ABAP Cloud is the name of the programming model. It can also happen in private cloud and on-premises environments, because often it's like ABAP Cloud, you do something in BTP, no, ABAP Cloud is just the name for the programming model, that you limit yourself to released APIs, and everything you call needs to be officially released. So you cannot go for every function model, for every table. No, you really need to look, and there are new kind of APIs available. So I think these three, it does not need to be the whole everything is BTP. It is, you can develop on stack and clean, and you need to find the right balance. And ABAP Cloud does not mean you automatically run in BTP.
Let's zoom in a little bit, Lukas, into the extensibility concept that was recently released. Could you tell us a bit about how that energy label construct looks like? What are the layers that are behind that? And what does that mean? What's basically new compared to the old definition of extensibility?
Yeah.
Because we get a lot of questions on this. So I think it's useful to zoom into the extensibility side of the house.
Yeah, it's rather new. I think the extensibility white paper and the whole concept was released mid of August. So I think it's fair to talk about that. To understand what has changed, I would give like the 1 minute overview what was there before. We called it the 3-tier extensibility model. If you ask your friend Google, you can still find it. And I guess also our favorite AI tools will all give us still the answer if you want to dive deeper. But the 1 minute intro is, we have 3 tiers with a focus on tier 1, that is clean development by just using released APIs. Limit yourself to released APIs. On stack, it's ABAP Cloud. Side by side, you can do that with ABAP, but also with different languages, different runtimes. But you limit yourself to released APIs. So no more direct access to table Mara, no more access to some kind of function module. If you do that, then you're by definition upgrade stable and future ready, and you limit yourself also to technologies that are, we could say cloud ready, to Fiori, and so no more sub GUI, all the things in there. And then we had tier 3, the lowest part, which is classic ABAP. Technically, there was tier 2 in between. That's like if you need to consume something in tier 1 that's not yet released, you can create your own wrapper on this. From my perspective, I think it was a bit misperceived. Sometimes on a management level, it was like, hey, you go from tier 3 to tier 1 and then to tier 2 and then to tier 1. But that's not how it works. It's like either you're in classic or you're in tier 1 in ABAP Cloud, and then the middle is just in between. But what we saw is, and now that's the big change, if you just report your numbers on what is really the perfect happy place, tier 1, and what's classic ABAP, you run into issues. Look at legacy systems, hundreds of thousands of custom code objects in there. And just to point that out, tier 1 and ABAP Cloud is only available as of S/4HANA 2022. So every development prior to that is automatically tier 3. If you don't want to look at that and you have 400,000 custom code objects, and you look and, hey, look, now I have 25 objects in tier 1 and 400,000 in tier 3, that doesn't look good. And what we also saw is that in this tier 3, in the classic, we need to look a little bit closer and more detailed and transparent into that, because in the old model, everything was the same level of evil. Everything was tier 3, everything was bad. But every developer knows there are very bad things you can do. You can call function modules that are super bad, that open up the system, that open up the floodgates. You can do modifications in places where you should not do this. That's super bad. You will have pain with every upgrade, or you will even create security issues. And there are things that are kind of okay, because with APIs that are released, you limit yourself to a certain level of functionality. And we all know that given the flexibility we had before, there might be gaps. So maybe you want to create a sales order, and in your API, the field that you want to influence is not available. Then you go for the BAPI that is behind the classic API. This is out there for years, even for decades. That's fine to be used. That's somewhat stable. It's not the most modern one. And we wanted to distinguish that. We say we open up this tier 3 and we say we have now different shades of bad in there. It's like there are parts that are okay. We call them classic APIs. And these classic APIs have a lower level of nomination internally. So it's not like a technical stability contract behind that. yes, they could in theory change, but it's like our product management says, hey, this BAPI is from us nominated as classic API. We will do everything to keep it stable. And it's not only BAPIs, it's classes. It's mainly new ones are often classes. We say, hey, these are recommended by us. In case you don't have a released API, go for this. And then we have the super bad ones, the not recommended ones, where we also said, hey, don't use these. Please do something else here or avoid this pattern in general. And this led to, we want to go away from this binary. Is something clean core, yes or no? Which is, of course, super interesting, and you want to measure it. It's very frustrating that even for new developments, if you end up with like only 20% is considered clean core. And it's like, but why are we so bad? It's like, we're not bad. We just need to, we all decided consciously, this is a requirement we need to cover. We save money here, and we did it the best way possible. And what we offered now is you mentioned already, a level concept, like the energy label levels you have on your fridge or your dishwasher, where it says, my dishwasher maybe has now energy level C, which is okay-ish, but doesn't make sense to rip it out and buy a new dishwasher just to have a more energy efficient one. Not if it's still running. It's like you would not go for an A just for something that's running. And this kind of more differentiated view is now introduced, that we have 4 levels of clean core. And we still aim for new developments for the highest level. Level A is working like tier 1 before. We work only with released APIs with the new technologies. But we introduced level B. If you're using classic APIs, then your extension is still okay. Especially looking at legacy code, it's like, if you are on level B, there is no need to directly change it just for the sake of moving from classic UI technology to Fiori or something like that. So we say, hey, that's okay. And then we have the level D, which is the super bad part, where you say we have nominated a few less than 500 objects. We have a few patterns in there. If you update directly to SAP tables, it's forbidden. You shouldn't do that. And these are mostly best practices that are around for years as well. And we say this is bad. And now I spared out the level C, what's in between. That's basically the internal objects. Because just to give you some perspective, we have, looking at all object types, 50,000 released objects, level A. We have 7,500 classic APIs. We have 500 super bad in level D. But an SAP system, depending on what installation you have, consists of millions of objects. And basically everything that's not mentioned somewhere, we call it an internal object. There are situations when you come from the top, you create something new, no released API, even the classic API is not able to do what you want to do. Then you call your friend, your experienced consultant, and he tells you, yeah, but there is this function module. Even standard is using that. We could use that and it's doing exactly what we need. It's not released. Okay, then it's an internal object. We can use it, but then you increase your risk in the next upgrade, because of course it was never meant to be an API. The standard developer could simply start and say, like, I used this class for myself, I will rework it for whatever reason, for legal reasons, for just a functionality point of view, or for refactoring reasons. And then your next upgrade will lead to efforts to adjust that. And this is why we call this kind of internal part, which is a big part of existing code, clearly as a separate level. It's not super bad, but it's like, whenever possible, move to a higher level. So that's the idea then of this level concept, to say, okay, we now give you a more detailed view, and we say not everything is the same level of evilness. And at the same time, looking at legacy systems with huge installed bases of custom code objects, it's not a goal to say like everything needs to be level A in the next year.
I mean, a lot of customers want to clean up now, right? I mean, yes, we have the new implementations, the greenfield implementations, the lighthouse implementations that Alex always likes to talk about, that are fully 100% Fiori based. But there are a lot of legacy systems you mentioned with millions and hundreds of thousands of objects. I think the first step to really get clean is to get an overview on where do I stand when it comes to the energy labels, to use the new wording now.
Yeah.
How can customers get that overview of how many objects or how many elements are part of level A, B, C, and D? Where to find that and how to actually get that view to see how deep is the shit, so to speak.
And that's an important point. It's like, because we often see that measurability around Clean Core is more like a myth, that customers say like, hey, we want to be 90% Clean Core. And then I ask like, okay, what do you mean by 90%? 90% clean in coding or in percentage of standard? So we need to measure. The tool to measure here is our ABAP test cockpit. So the standard tool to assess code quality. There is a new version of, or a new check version within ATC available. It is available through an SAP node, 3565942. If you want to write it down, maybe we have some show notes and put it in there.
We put
Just
it in
a
the show
question.
notes.
Yeah, and a
Definitely.
question: Did you just do that out of your head, or did you have that somewhere like right in front of you?
Unfortunately, I know it out of my head because I quoted it quite a lot of times in the last few weeks. But it's like the central node. This is like the new, if you implement it, you have a new ATC check version. And that is handling the level concept according to priorities. So if you have a custom code object, you run your ATC, ATC comes up with messages in different priorities. If it is an error message, your object will be considered as level D. So all the bad findings, if you have a modification or a direct table write statement, so an update to an SAP table, it will pop up as an error, which we would then translate into level D. If you use internal objects that are not released and not nominated as classic API, it's a warning message, prior 2. And if you use a classic API, it's a prior 3, so just an information message. And with this, we give you then the option that you can assess your code. And what I like on this is the level of granularity, because you can go down into even object level and say like, hey, this piece of code has 15 errors, the other has only 12. And then you can do nice things. In the white paper, we describe it as one of the KPIs. You can create a technical depth score on that and say like, hey, every error gives you like 10 virtual points of technical depth score. Every warning, level C, gives you 5. Every info message gives you 1 point. And of course, you could also do that in an Excel on your own. And then you feel like, okay, now I can assess where is the biggest technical depth. Because in the end, this is a representation of technical depth in your system. How many things do I have that are in which kind of level deviating from the ideal world, from the level A world? And I would say this is a starting point. Assess your system, understand where technical depth is. And then we come back that me as the lead for Clean Core Extensibility, I would say like, yeah, that's everything we can do in extensibility. Then we need to talk to processes. Is it a surprise that this object is now the dirtiest one in your system? Sometimes it's like, yeah, we need this. It's an extension to do in our warehouse this and that. It saves us millions every year. That's like, okay, if there is no better way to do it technically, then maybe it's fine to have this kind of technical depth exactly here because it generates value. But in reality, it's often like, that's something we actually thought we don't use anymore. Or, you have these surprise moments and you can now create transparency.
How do you link it,
to it,
Lukas? How do you link it? So I recently visited a customer, big German customer, DAX 40, and they said to me, yes, we have a lot of developments, but we weren't sure anymore what they really do. Like, how to link that to a process? And I think that's a common problem, right?
Exactly. And I think there is no golden bullet for that for existing systems. There are nice approaches to do that. So we have services-wise, we have a clustering path to say like, hey, can we automatically identify what's an extension? But I think this is the big question. Can you relate your lowest level, the custom code object, to a process or to an extension, a requirement in the end? And I think this is where, especially in greenfield projects, I would say where tools come in, tool chain comes in, and integration. If you track your requirements from the initial request and the approval from a functional perspective down to what objects were created, what transports are behind this, then you can create this transparency. But for legacy systems, it is highly different depending on what customers did and what efforts they have. The most common pattern we see is that in systems we have a good package structure, and that you can, based on the package where this code is collected in, identify, hey, this is something in my logistics process. Or sometimes I've seen that with one big automotive customer, there, based on the object name, you can identify which project was it created for. So yes, there are paths to do that, but I think this is exactly the point where the extensibility and the process dimension need to work together. It's like, because in the end, if you have hundreds of thousands of custom code objects, it comes even back to how credible is your system if you do not know what code is running there, what it's doing, who created it, and what's the impact is, because that's a bad state.
So we cannot run an episode of transformation every day without mentioning the word AI. Yeah, sorry, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Is there any tooling or do you let me put it differently? I don't want to put advertisement or anything, but is there, do you think that AI tools can build this connection to actual processes?
Or it can at least support. So I'm already in our preparation, I mentioned I'm not the biggest AI hype surfer, but still I see the value. And one step back, because I just mentioned ATC, it just popped to my mind. The data from ATC will end of this month, so end of October, when we are recording, be also available in the RISE dashboard, so that you can see it also in a central place. So there is the RISE with SAP methodology dashboard in Cloud ALM available. Then you will also see the level concept and everything there. And that, before we enter the AI topic, that's for me the most important point, that you have deterministic data in the system that gives you so many different pieces of information. Because we have, with this check, you can identify what do I use, even from what area do I use SAP objects that are not released. And SAP often gives you also the information, is there a successor available? So today you do a select from a table. We officially have a list of successors available, and then you can say like, hey, this is a potential that I can directly understand. So these are, I would say, basic things that you can do that are deterministic. Coming back now to the question of AI, and it was slightly a different question, how does it support in this question of mapping code to a process? I think one of the biggest strengths of AI is when it comes to coding, the explain feature. If you have code in front of you, you can ask AI, hey, what is this code doing? And their AI is rarely hallucinating, I would say, because it's deterministic what you have in front of you. And also, most of the code is very much digested by these big LLMs. So be it our internal aspects that we have our tool for developers, but also by the large public LLMs. They know pretty well for many of the function modules, many of the classes that are used, what's going on. So it could be a good bridge. If you have no clue what this report or what this class is doing, you just throw it into an LLM and tell them, hey, give me an idea what this is doing. And then you can use it to reverse engineer. But of course, it's never better. It's like, if you have no documentation, if you have no requirement from back then, it's useful. But of course, it's only the second best solution. Ideally, you have some requirement. But even then, it's like, maybe the official documentation from the gap that we had 5 years ago, everyone knows, but we changed so much, the code is not exactly what's in there. So yes, it can help you there. And I think there it's a big support, because who wants to pay someone just to dive 2 hours into code and to write me then, what's going on here in this code? That's not very useful. That's, developers can do better stuff than that.
Absolutely. And when we look back, for example, into the last 10 years, I look, for example, at brownfield migrations to S/4HANA. Brownfield migrations usually expect that you have the technical part in the beginning, then you have the go live, and then starts the adoption of the innovation, which also includes these kinds of cleaning up activities, which meant already for the last 10 years moving more into a clean core, which from my experience in most of the cases did never happen, for exactly those reasons, because that were activities that took about a year. You had 2, 3, 4 consultants doing that job, where nobody really saw in the first sign very easily on return of invest. And as such, of course, you close the door into many into many possibilities and innovation possibilities that SAP provides. Do you expect from that side, with those AI tools now coming in and let's call it like lower the levels of entrance into the clean core world, do you expect that this kind of topic gets for customer more approachable now?
At least when I look at offerings that are out there that promise the world with AI, you could think that. I'm a bit more hesitant there, because in the end, you cannot take the mentioned 400 or 500,000 or even 100,000 custom code objects, run all of them through an LLM, give you a nice summary, and then what? Do you ask your LLM, like, hey, what do you think is the best case to clean up? That answer will be very vague, because it's like the LLM will not understand what your business is. Well, there is, I would say, a high danger on that. But exactly to lower this barrier, that's one good point, because what we typically recommend for these brownfield scenarios is, and let me explain it by giving the opposite example. I was once in a POC where the expectation was, because of high-level management meeting, there they said, yeah, now next year we do Clean Core. The expectation was, in the next 12 months, we clean up our system. It was one of the largest S4 systems I've ever seen, like I think 700,000 custom code objects. So it's really massive. And the expectation was somehow said, we clean this up in the next year. Give us the tools, give us the automation. And let's for 1 second assume we have this magic tool that kind of converts all of your custom code from classic into the highest possible level. But then what? If the development comes for free and the analysis and into the development comes for free, then what? How do you do the change management with all of your users? They know the ALV, they know everything. So what's the value that you have the same extension with the same requirement that was valid 15 years ago, now built in a different technical way that's more a cleaner way to do that? It's like, what's the value of that? That's why I would say for brownfield scenarios or for these massive systems with a massive history, I would always say the steps should be taken wisely, and you should do that use case by use case, which means it's a long run. It's not that you will do this in the next 12 months, or not even for the large system. Even setting a goal like 2030, that would mean that every year you have to clean up 20% of your whole code base. That's a massive thing. If you want to do this, you spend a lot of money, and then you need to ask yourself, if there is a report that is used by 5 people that are experts twice a year, why should I rebuild that if that's no longer a key component, or if there is no added value to put this into Fiori, and I don't need to train hundreds of people on there? So go into that and say, like, hey, use case by use case, or introduce then small parts to say, like, you measure something and then you set goals, and they need to buy in from the highest level to say, like, okay, I like to call this the Boy Scout principle, to say, whenever you touch code for a change, leave the camp, or in this case, leave the code cleaner as you found it. And that's a smart way to clean up step by step. But of course, it will not be that if you fix a bug in a custom class, you will not revamp that completely. But it's like, maybe I can adjust here and there. But then you need to understand, what is my technical depth in that class, and how is the impact behind that? And I think this is why it's important to have this measurability. It could be also one statement to say, we look at the top 10 objects that have the most technical depth score that we mentioned a few minutes back. And that's one factor. But in the end, it's just one factor, like usage, like how much value does it give us? Maybe there's a change and we anyway have to redevelop something. Then these are good factors. But I would say this needs to be a case-by-case view. And you cannot simply say, and even with the best, like mentioned, even with the best AI tools, what's the value of changing now everything if we forget about the people that use the system, and then in the end, the system is no longer working? It's like, nice, we changed everything. From a technical perspective, I'm happy, everything's clean, but no one's able to use the system. What did we win in the end?
Absolutely. And I think and you said it, the most important thing there, considering the hype. The problem is with those technology, always when you see it like black and white, something that used to be a very manual task, like cleaning up, has been done manually, is now completely done by AI. And I fully agree, it probably is not like that. I think the best possible way to see it is it's still people business. It's still people deciding where to approach and how to employ it. But when you have your toolbox enriched with AI possibilities, so now that kind of formally complete manual task is now more automated than before, and you save by this like 30-40% maybe of your effort and of your costs to do that, this is a huge step forward, in my opinion, already. But one thing remains definitely the same. It is a people activity. Change has to be managed. Yeah, no doubt about that.
And then also, I think key is really the trackability, that you have then also this view, because then you can do the nice things that you motivate people by setting goals to say like, hey, and even you can think of gamification. We did that. So it was mentioned, it was not yet mentioned, but we did a little open source project, and this is used at customers. And what we do there is now for almost half a year, but was developed with customers before that. We create this technical depth score as a point score. And then you can see my object, this one has 15,000 points, the next one has 12,000 points. Just to set this up and to create, and that's very important, a healthy way of competition, to say like, hey, in our team, we can reduce that easily by 10%. This gives you clarity. I agree, in the end, if you have tools around like Joule for developers or even using other LLMs, that's fine. That could be a good thing. But in the end, it's like you need to have that in your toolbox and know what you're doing. And I think an experienced senior developer can speed up with this. But it's very important because you mentioned like the cleaning up. I think all of these new models that are publicly out there, the ChatGPTs of this world, they are trained based on what is out there in the internet. And the new programming model in ABAP is not that much out there in the internet. So if you prompt something together, you often receive answers that look like mid-90s, end 90s, or something like that. So it is also somewhat of a risk to rely on AI there and say like, you need to double check. Is it really doing the right thing? Is it knowing what kind of API is available? No, it's not. Then maybe I need to rework it.
Now imagine I'm a head of development. What's my business case? Why should I invest my precious ABAP developers, especially the one that already have gone through the trainings that you mentioned, that have that mindset of continuous learning? Shouldn't I invest these people in building new stuff instead of fixing old stuff? So what's my business case?
I would say we have these two notions in Clean Core. One is get clean. We just mentioned you need to clean up, you need to set goals and stuff like that. But that's for me the second step you can take. The first step is always stay clean. Set up your governance, set up your development guidelines, enable your developers for everything that's new. And if you have a lot of, let's call it net new development, I would for sure want to look at that the right people are in there, at least a sparring partner, that you do not create classic ALV just because someone didn't know that Fiori and RAP is the new way to go, and that someone is doing a select from a table because they didn't know there is a CDS view that you should use that's released, and someone is using a function model that's not released and not using the business object interface that we offer as new technology. Yes, I would agree. There's more value in if you go for new developments, but also looking at numbers. I was with a very large consumer products company last year. There we discussed exactly this. Hey, we do this for every new development. And that was the main goal until I think it was a head of development, a very smart woman stood up and said like, hey, but look, 97 or 98% of our developments of our transports that leave the system are based on changes on existing code. So if you have the luxury that you have a lot of net new developments because you maybe roll out to new countries, maybe you have new business areas, then I would say that's a focus area. And this stay clean is super important and it should be mandatory. Everything that you create today, what's the reason not to create something clean today? Maybe missing APIs, but then it's an informed decision. I would still consider it clean. But for all the cleaning up parts, there needs to be a business case. And I would say there's maybe 1 or 2 lighthouse projects you can have in a bigger system a year maximum, where you say like, hey, there I do something, but it's not the one with the highest technical depth score. It's the one where maybe business says, we anyway have to change because for legal reasons, we need to introduce this new step in the process. If we anyway have 100 days of efforts, then let's take 150 and we do revamp the whole thing in a clean way. But I agree, you should not just for the sake of cleaning up, do the cleaning up, because then someone will ask you and then like, hey, your developers, what did they do the last year? And they say, hey, for the sake of beauty and clean core and clean architecture, we revamped all of our code. And then it's like, and what's the value? it looks nicer now. It's like, yeah, cool. But what's the business value?
Exactly. I mean, I think we spoke about that earlier, that Clean Core has not just the extensibility dimension. We spoke to Michael a lot about processes. Let's zoom into the integration piece a little bit. Maybe not in full swing, in full detail, but at least I think it's interesting for the audience to speak a bit about the integration. In one of the customer conversations that I had, I got an interesting question. I want to hear your perspective on this. The question was very simple, like, am I clean core if I don't use BTP for integration?
Difficult question, because I'm getting paid my salary by SAP. So I would say everything from SAP is, of course, the best you can do. But now looking at let's say now I'm a Clean Core evangelist. I know Clean Core is an SAP term, but looking at it now from a very theoretical point of view, I would say it's important for integration, and the same is valid for extensibility, that you decouple yourself from standard, that you use released APIs that are stable. But if you can achieve this without using any SAP
Cloud
integration
platform
suite, for
integration.
example, if you do that in another way, I would still say it's considered clean. Because for me, the core of Clean Core is, if you do an upgrade to the next version, can you do that without impacting in integration your interfaces, in extensibility, your custom code? If you can manage this, you can even create maybe some nasty VBA extensions in an Excel sheet where you officially connect through released APIs and tell, hey, that's side by side, although it's not running in BTP. As long as you use the right APIs, I would say that is possible. What you miss out then is standard integration content. So maybe it's a bit more difficult or cumbersome, but it's like, still I would say, yes, you can be Clean Core.
So the way you are interpreting or evangelizing Clean Core is very much centered around the core ERP. If I go beyond the business suite and look at the integration layers there, would you still say that, I don't know, building up or missing out of standard integration content is something that's desirable? Or
no, I would say there's a different ballgame. True, that was very much ERP and S4 focused. But of course, if there is a standard integration available between different parts of the business suite, then I would highly recommend to leverage it, because you can benefit from this standard content. And in case there is some change in your integration flow or in the components that are integrated and interfacing with one another, then the standard integration flow will be adapted as well. So it's like, it's less effort for you. If you do all this by a nasty shell script somewhere, you will need to adjust this every time. So it's like, even if you use nice released APIs, maybe then standard is developing further and then they are deprecating an API. You need to go for a new version and you have the effort. So the cleanest way possible is for integration. If you look at the whole picture, of course, going with our recommended standard integration approaches, because it simply saves you lots of effort in the end.
If we look, for example, to the next years, how do you expect the landscape evolving with what we discussed, with the new attitude coming up, with the cloudification coming up, with AI tools coming up? Do you think this is where we're standing, considering this kind of, let's say, new attitude towards how we introduce individuality into the system? This is just the beginning, or what do you expect from your perspective?
I would say it is now more mature than 3 years ago. I would say 3 years ago, when we introduced ABAP Cloud on stack in the S4 world, and this is unfortunately where most of the unclean stuff happens, in the stack, in the ERP or S4 system, there it was more an idealistic picture to say, like, yeah, everything needs to be on released APIs. At the same time, I feel our development colleagues in our standard development, because if you release an API, it needs to be stable and you need to keep that stable. So you're kind of excluding this from innovation. If you want to add something, adding is easier, but if you want to rework something, it's simply not possible. You need to have more overhead on that. And that's why we limit, of course, APIs to, let's say, areas where we say this is a common ground and this is something like that. And what I see now is that we have now, I would say, a very realistic picture. And that's also a danger, because in the end, what is the goal of all of this movement? If you say like, hey, cloudification, I would not believe that a system with like 400,000 custom code modification, custom code objects, and I don't know, thousands of modifications will easily move into a public cloud or SaaS tenant within the next 2 years. But what's the long-term goal then? And there, I think Clean Core and this approach of doing the best level you can and getting the transparency will help you to be at some point able to lead this discussion, because now it's rather easy to say, look, I have 400,000 custom code object. It will never work. But if you then look, how would you do that kind of transformation then? Long-term, of course, it's a huge thing and maybe not the goal for these huge boxes, but what's the approach? You go into then a fit to standard approach. And if you then have clarity, and that's maybe the task then for us, we need to gain this clarity to say like, hey, and here we have some nasty extensions in this kind of process step here. Do we still need this? Would we be okay, or what would be our pain without it? Is there any way we can do it in a clean way? And that leads us to this discussion. So I think as developers, I feel, and this is coming, I'm quoting just a customer here, and that was interestingly enough 5 years ago. They were like, I'm not thinking of 2025 back then. I'm thinking of 2030, 2035. Would we be happy with what we develop today if we don't stick to the newest paradigms and to the right approaches of released objects, or if we just continue? And that's why in the beginning I mentioned with the level concept, we need to clearly state you should always aim for the highest level. On the high level picture, it says right now, level A and B are both clean core. But if you do everything just based on the minimum layer, you will end up without being ready for your transformation whenever it happens in the future. So yes, I would say this is kind of a mandatory topic for developers. And as mentioned before, it's like code quality. No one will pay you extra to write good and secure code. And I think this should be also the attitude. No one should say like, but yeah, now I need to do it clean and then I don't know this new stuff. I think that should not be the attitude that we expect from developers. At the same time, we need to be a bit careful. It's like, if you're just pushed from one project to the other and you're a developer, of course, someone needs to enable you on that. So we need to be fair there. But together, I think it's important that we have this in mind, that we don't do bad things.
Lukas, welcome to live Q&A. I just got a message. It exactly fits to this topic. Sorry, I have to do that now because it perfectly fits on Clean Core and SaaS. The question is, hey Johannes, what is the approach of Clean Core in regards to SAP S/4HANA Public Cloud? Do you have some guidance here? So I'm going to pass this on to you. I'm going to take some notes now, Lukas, and look forward to your answer. It is a funny coincidence.
Yeah, but it is a fair point. I would say in S/4HANA Public Cloud, the only options that you have to extend are clean. You only have level A or tier 1 or whatever we want to call it, because you are exactly limited to the released APIs, which increases the importance of availability of APIs in public cloud enormously, because in private cloud and on-premise, you can still work around classic APIs. Worst case, you do a modification. It's like you're rather flexible. But this is SaaS. This is, the upgrade is happening in this case every 6 months. It needs to be happening in an automated way. So this is basically the target that we aim for. But you need to be aware you are a lot more limited. But in an S/4HANA public cloud, from a technical point of view, then we come back to the 5 dimensions. For extensibility, you can only create clean extensions from a technical level. Of course, you can still do bad things from a complete picture. You can still do duplicates or extensions where it's not needed. You need to have the full picture on this, because just because you tell me, hey, can you add this kind of custom development and custom UI? Yes, I can build it. But if someone comes around the corner and says like, but this is exactly what is here in standard, why did you build it? It's like, oh, oopsie. It's like, it's still, I would not consider it clean on the big picture. But in public cloud, this is exactly, I think that we opened up, and that's maybe a point to mention. Even in S/4HANA Public Cloud, you can create ABAP objects on stack. ABAP Cloud is available there. You can create a new class, a new table, stuff like that, but you're limited to these released API. to level A. And I think this is, to put this answer a bit shorter, this is like, in public cloud, technically you're only able to create clean extensions.
But one spin on that is quite important to me, and it's shining through from your perspective, what you are telling us, and from Michael's also. It's quite easy to frame Clean Core as a restriction, because it's quite commonly said, you have not the freedom anymore to develop as you want. I would not try to frame it like that, because I think it's discipline. Of course, it's a regimen, but it's an enabler for sustainable innovation. Yeah, it's like how you treat yourself, how you treat your body. Do you nutrition yourself with healthy foods, or do you eat junk food all the time? And I think that's exactly how we see it. It's about it's about technical excellence, of course, but that should be the attitude that we always have to the extensions that we do, to the developments that we do, because in the end, it's something which probably we are having to work with it, grateful in years, when we have to open up the box again, when we have to change something. It's definitely something we will think back, the Clean Core was probably quite a good idea.
Sure. I like that statement a lot, because for me, when I first heard of this option that we introduce ABAP Cloud also in our public cloud system, that you can do something on stack there, that was really eye-opening, because it's like, hey, that's now a concept that clearly states what's good, how you develop in future. And that gives you, thinking now about what you just mentioned and these analogies, it's a bit like, in, I think, other countries mainly, but also sometimes in Germany, we have these food labels. What is good for you? And it's like an API has an A on that for this is very good, it's like this is healthy and stuff like that. Of course, with the food labels, sometimes you should not only eat the A part, and then you can still get sick. So the picture is not perfect, but I think this is it. Now we have and that also is a relief for developers, because before it's like, I Googled this function module seems to be good. Now you have a clear statement. You can look for this publicly. Is this released? Can I use it? Is it guaranteed by SAP? Is it documented and stuff like that? Yes, now you have it. It's no longer this kind of druid that sits there for 20 years and is a magician of ABAP. No, it's getting more public. So I also see it as an enabler to say, like, hey, this is now a possibility to say, this is released. This is the good stuff.
And I give you another perspective on that. It gives us the responsibility, like in the consulting and also in the sales world and so on, not to go down the easy route and telling customers like, you have there something additional. We do not have to talk about this, because it's a platform. You can do anything that you want. Because that has happened so often in the last 20 years that it was done and used as an excuse. Now we have to be definitely much more focused, definitely much more strict on what we want to achieve in that area. Looking at the time, Lukas, it was really eye-opening. My last question to you would be, if you could give one practical tip to every SAP developer listening who wants to start their Clean Core journey tomorrow, what would it be?
Familiarize yourself with the material around ABAP Cloud, and there is plenty of material. That's the big change that we have that's publicly available. Just in the last few weeks, we have, again, a Devtoberfest, so YouTube content on the newest part of what's out there for developers. We have learning journeys, and for me, a good starting point is the ABAP Cloud certification. So there's a new certification for ABAP, around for roughly 2 years, called ABAP Cloud certification. What's good is, of course, you can do the certification. We all like certifications, but there are learning journeys bound to that. And these learning journeys, you can dive in for free. They have coding examples. From there, you get then into tutorials. There are even the RAP 100 workshops available on GitHub. So there's a lot of material out there. That would be the hands-on recommendation. The other part is evangelize internally also your management to say, like, hey, we need to go into this direction, and think of this. Can we introduce mandatory code checks that we ourselves ensure this kind of excellence?
Fantastic. Lukas, when people want to get in contact with you, how should they do this best?
Ideally through LinkedIn. Not visit me in Berlin directly, because that would be a bit of a surprise. But I would say medium active on LinkedIn compared to you, Alex. Maybe not that active. I always feel like, hey, I want to write a blog and do this and that. But I'm on there. I'm happy to have any new comments, any new requests coming in. And even if you like to learn or see what's new on Clean Core, every now and then I do a post there and say like, hey, that's new. For example, on the level concept, I did some stuff. So happy. I think that's the easiest way to connect.
Definitely a good idea to follow you. Lukas, thank you very much. Was really fantastic to learn from you. Johannes, great to have you back.
Thank you.
And I think this is not the last time we speak in this group that we have assembled here. Have a great day. Have a good start into the rest of this week. And thank you very much for joining us.
Cool. Thank you. And thanks for having me.